everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Beyond the Buy Box. I'm Jen Elmashni here. Really excited and thrilled to have Kristina Mueller join us today as our guest. She is a powerhouse in the world of all things digital. Kristina is currently the Associate Director at AbbVie for Strategic Communications and Operations, but has a long-standing history as well in the digital commerce arena, leading a variety of transformations, building brands, working the startup world, working large brands. Previously came from large organizations like Spectrum Brands, but also I think fascinating has the startup experience as well and then sort of new up and coming digital platforms. And so, Christina, I'm so excited to have you here today sharing your experiences and for all of our community members that are really interested in hearing from industry leaders like yourself who've sort of been in the grind of trying to figure out how to navigate online marketplaces and faced with some super fascinating experiences. And I know you have some spicy ones for us today. So thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me. I think you blew me up bigger than I am, but I do have some spicy hot goss for you.
Yes, yes.
Can
Let's
guarantee
start
that.
there. So if you think broadly, kind of across all of your experiences, tell me about any times where you've had those like, you can't make this up moments. I know you shared a little bit of a snip. For me, I would love for our community members to hear and some of the things that you learned that sort of knocked you off your feet. What were some of the surprises that you faced in terms of building something and on the online universe and some of the things you didn't really anticipate?
Super. So many good stories, but I think if we just narrow down, I think what was one of those you can't make this thing up and what really surprised me, I think was really discovering early on when I started my e-commerce career as, e-commerce was just burgeoning and really beginning, right? In the really early days, discovering how big cybercrime really is in the US. And it's a large crime. I think the latest statistic is something like in 2024, there were over $16 billion in cybercrime fraud scams that were affecting
Thank
people.
goodness.
And so, right, it's huge. And so that was the first piece. And then the second piece is learning what happens with that fraud and that it does trickle down. It does trickle down into many industries after folks have been scammed. And that then what do you do about it? And so the big moment for me was finding out that your local law enforcement agency is not going to help handle this for your business or your small business. The FBI does not really handle it. They report on it. And the biggest funny moment for me was finding out that the Secret Service in the US is who handles the majority of cybercrime and investigates the majority of the large cyber crimes and internet scams, credit card frauds, and so forth. So it's like this division that is meant to basically safeguard the president. And they do this on the weekends. They spend a lot of time during their week also investigating cybercrime. Absolutely fascinating. And I had the pleasure
So
of meeting
fascinating.
with some of these individuals.
Which is so bananas. And how did you, without giving away too much of the goods, because I imagine involving the Secret Service might be a little bit tricky to share. How did that even come up and were you faced with a situation where you had to pull in the big forces to get help?
Gotcha. I mean, this is one of those things where I think I can share the full details. And also before I share further, I actually do need to say that I work for a company that I love. I do work for AbbVie today and love that. And then I want to express that I am not speaking on this podcast in any way on behalf of AbbVie, and that all of these stories and opinions are my own, and some of these stories like this one is great. This is outside of AbbVie experience. This is past experience, and I can really give you all the details here. I'm kind of
Yeah,
excited to
let's do
share
it.
because I wish I heard more about it, right, when I was in it. So how this started is I discovered in a small startup business that I was working in that we were having a serious problem, serious to the tune of $1 million problem. And I literally started out just looking like, who can help us with this problem? There is this fraudulent activity that's happening, and it's costing us in a very serious way. And that's how I was able to connect in with the Secret Service. And so to describe the issue, I liken it to the Wild West, right? Of the internet. The internet's a Wild West. E-commerce is a Wild West. And when you are growing and developing something new, you're going to run into bandits along the way. And so this is what was happening. If you've ever purchased something, on hotels.com or other kind of conglomerate sites like that, or sites that became like the wayfair.com, which really kind of was a conglomerate of a lot of like mini websites. I was in an industry that was trying to do the same thing. And so we were starting up, very small handful of us trying to do the same thing around activities. And as we were doing this around the same time, is when that big Target scandal happened, where a lot of credit cards were stolen. So early, like 2000s. And what happened is that was trickling down to us. And so, right, and that's the aftermath, right? The things get stolen, and then what happens next? So the cards were stolen, and the folks who had stolen them were these large crime rings in the US and outside of the US who were utilizing these, and they saw a window of opportunity, as what happens with bandits, right? When you're growing something, they saw the opportunity and they started to take advantage of these activities that we had. And some of our large accounts were folks like the big theme parks like Disney and Universal, and the major zoos and other theme parks in the US. And they found this opportunity to take these stolen cards, purchase the tickets, and then allow it to wash through hands. So folks were utilizing, or consumers were utilizing places like Craigslist or eBay to purchase these really great rates on these tickets. So they would purchase it, and then their whole family would, let's say your family shows up with these tickets that you got online, maybe not through the best source possible, but you got them online, and then you show up to the parks, and the parks are like, this is not good. This is a scam. But they don't really want to turn you away because you're not the person that was the person that used the card, that was the person that sold the card information, and so forth. So it's really hard to track down in terms of investigation where a lot of it was coming from. We did help support these investigations with IP addresses and so forth, but it affected our industry because they were also using us who were having these tickets. They were using these fake credit cards to purchase legitimate tickets through us. And then the problem then becomes the consumers are protected. So let's say you legitimately purchased a ticket through us, great, you can go to the park. If a scammer bought the tickets through us and it's your credit card that was stolen, you get to charge it back. So then you have the charge back. I have to eat the chargeback fee, and the money has now left my bank account. And then now I also have a large account that I'm supposed to pay. So it's all invoicing down to me. And so I'm seeing this huge impact happening to my business, and I'm suffering as a business versus the other folks are heading to the theme park with these tickets now that have been resold through Craigslist from me and changed hands. And then the parks are invoicing me. And I'm like, what do I do? And who handles this? And how do we figure out this fraud? And that led me to the Secret Service. And so it's tough. Those are tough moments. And you really don't even see an industry having done that because of the big e-ticket scams that were taking place. You don't see some of the larger conglomerates that I think we could have had and that we were working on. Maybe now with some of the protections and things that have been put into place, all these like 15 years later, it might be a good time. But I saw a whole segment of a really cool industry just kind of get shaken down because of that.
Well, I'm sure, from a consumer experience, it's like such a double-edged sword because the intention of these startups. I worked for a similar startup way back early 2000s in the luxury online experience, kind of daily deals. So get this flash sale, get this experience at a deep discount, but it was a luxury experience. And even back I can relate because folks were very hesitant to trust that you could purchase this experience. And actually, it was almost too good to be true. And in these cases where you were legitimately bartering with these experiences to have a legitimate experience, yet having this middle entity, sort of ruin that and trying to figure out how do you get your arms around it, like frustrating all around. Consumer, also from a financial, I would hate to see, sort of the bills that, accrued and how you obviously had to, bring on a bigger entity. I'm curious, in early in your career, kind of going through something like that as you fast forward into some of your wearing your marketing kind of digital leadership hats, how has that shaped kind of the way you go about brand building, especially online, knowing that there's always loopholes that folks are trying to chip away at that can disrupt what you're trying to build? What are some of the things that you automatically like? Here's what I your rhythm of what you factor in as a result of an experience like that.
Excellent question. I mean, you have to learn from these experiences. I think you have to know that they're coming and you have to be nimble. And as leaders in this e-commerce space, we are constantly having to be nimble anyway, right? Just being nimble in the ways that the platforms change and the algorithms change. That's already something that keeps us on our toes. And then I think you have to wear your own black hat. A lot of us are above board, so we have to take a moment and think about ways, how would I set up Christina's garage and really scam these, third party marketplaces that are widely available? But I do have to do that. I have to put that cap on and think, okay, what would I do? Because that's maybe what they would do. No, and that is what they are doing. Right. We know that. And so if I can't get ahead of them, then I'm not going to be as successful as I would if I don't, put on that hat, think about all these different ways and know that there's going to be better ways and those folks are going to be better than me at coming up with these scams. But it's the way that some of these law enforcement agencies work. Sometimes they do contract with former criminals anyway, right, to kind of get into their mindset to help them solve the problems. And so we have to do that. We have to embrace it, embrace that it's happening, embrace that there are these bandits out there that are going to take advantage of us any way that they can, because there's not a lot of protections in place. And we have to do that. We also can get help with that, right? I mean, you have an organization yourself. You're leading an organization that I enjoy working with my own self that is helping to do this. So we're not alone, but we have to think smart and think ahead and sometimes think like the bandit ourselves.
Yeah. And I completely agree. It's like that old adage of put yourself in the other's shoes. I think oftentimes we try to anticipate, okay, what does the consumer want, or what is our end client or customer? Such a good piece of advice. And actually it's the put yourself in who's going to try to game the system. And how do you get your arms around learning and getting exposure to what are those ways of working, making sure that there's multiple hats that you're stepping into. I like the black hat because I do agree. Sometimes when you anticipate the black hat or the really, really big black hat, then it allows you to have really,
Yeah.
really thorough plans or ask the questions that maybe others normally here's your kind of classic playbook of how to go forward, that it probably brings another light to the table that just orients folks in a little bit of a different way.
I love
But
it. You said
I
think like a consumer. So you're right. Yeah, you could put together that strategy or your playbook. You're about to do a launch and you're like, okay, think and segment your consumer. Maybe you have to segment your criminals in there as well. Think like the criminal, add that checkbox.
totally, totally. You know, the kind of like these threats that could pop up, thinking, black hat, the wild, wild west. I like that kind of visual in my mind as well. Um, how do you balance, doing things that are immediate, near term in order to get something off the ground, run a day-to-day operation of whatever business you've been a part of. Meanwhile, put things in place that might have more longer term helpful implications. Talk me through how you kind of think through and what would be some of those, tried and true things from a right now is really important in kind of protecting, the business or the brands that you've had the, opportunity to work with, but then also the longer term, whether it's process or, kind of strategies as well.
Super. Yeah. Let me answer that in terms of an example. So, in the past, I did have an issue with a launch. Unfortunately, it was one of the best launches of my career. Unfortunately, it also was severely impacted by crime and fraud. And so when I was faced with it, it really did have that breakout like you're asking about, with what are the short-term strategies that you can get in place right away, and then what are the long-term strategies. So let's talk short term, things I could do with immediacy. In this example, I was able to do things thinking about the consumer. And so one of my favorite places to play is in the gallery, right? That's one of the best places that we know consumers are swiping through. They'll swipe through every image in your product page galleries on your own website and on the retailer websites. And so I really like to think first, knowing this is where their eyeballs are going to go. And I like to think about transparency. And so we've seen those as consumers and as business professionals in e-commerce, where you have that gallery image that says, remember to purchase from this authorized seller if you have an authorized seller, or purchase directly from Amazon if it was Amazon or Walmart or whatever, is creating that first image to maybe sow that little bit of doubt for the consumer who's purchasing, so that doubt or that reminder that, hey, if you want the authorized product that was stored properly, that is not counterfeit, if that's an issue you're dealing with or whatever, then make sure that you pay attention to that buy box and that you're getting it from the right source. And the easiest place is, again, where the eyeballs are, in the gallery. And then from there, there's some middle term strategies and things that you're going to have to deal with, right, to get into it. And that's some investigation, some scraping, and ensuring you're on top of that. But the long term things that I find are the most difficult tend to deal with the financials and pricing. And a lot of us, especially in manufacturing, tend to have lots of pricing discrepancies or haywire inside sales, pricing, and distribution that can go all over the place. And that can be the most difficult place to implement change, and certainly not short-term changes. But it must be done. And I think for me, the strategy is remembering that it's not just done internally, which is tough, but also externally with some of the retail partners or some of the third-party marketplaces. And so again, in this same example, I say it's all about the dollars when it comes to these pricing strategies, and really showcasing, I'm a marketer, but showcasing that story, right, behind this is what's happening. This is what's forecast to happen. And in this example, this is what's going to happen if we do nothing. And this is what's going to happen if we do something. And really making that extremely clear to your leadership and teams involved that this is why we must put this in place. And it's got to be on those dollars, and you got to forecast big and show them what the dollars are. I can't emphasize enough on doing that. It's not just about the fraud or the crime that's taking place. It's about what is that dollar business impact and what is it long term. And in this example, I was also able to turn that over to Amazon, where I'm dealing with this internally. I'm making those short-term changes, but I, in this example, was also saying, hey, Amazon, you got to do something about this. And of course, it can be tough with a retail team. And so my solution was to take this to the advertising team, because they have dollars there as well. And so I was able to take that same story and say, hey, guys, this is what happened. This was the best launch ever. Look where it was forecast to be. Look at how it kicked off. And then look now at what's happened because of this fraud and because of our ability and lack of doing anything about it. And guess what numbers you're also missing? My marketing dollars. I'm not going to be able to spend this, which I was forecast to spend with you, because we're doing nothing, right? So just constantly sharing that story, forecasting that story, dollars speak.
I love it. On both of those, one, it's getting really creative about who you need to bring in and how to influence them. So in this, and I love that. And actually in both of them, let's go back to your first example. I love that pro tip kind of hack. It's not really a hack. It's like with best practice. I could advise that, and I will use that snippet in our push out for folks who are curious to know what are some things and how you creatively use content strategies. Like I love the call out directly on your PDP, especially for, consumer products that there's a lot to risk and a lot to lose, and detriment your brand if you don't know if you're getting it from someone who's authorized or not. And I've heard, and some folks who've shared some anecdotes of doing a similar strategy on the company website as like a consumer insight, consumer promise, with a list of authorized partners. But I like that this is very, very overt and actually highly visible, that we're going to feed it to you in a creative way no matter what. So I love that pro tip. The second one too, in terms of the longer term and really smart on who's leaving money on the table. I think, we all try to get really creative in influencing a pricing strategy so that everyone benefits. And if the consumer is willing to pay, great. Now then you kind of throw in AI and matching algorithms and all wild, wild west breaks loose. But I love the influencing marketing side with Amazon Media because they're losing money on the table that you're not able to invest in something that's a loss leader. So love those two examples so much. Really, really great. If you had to leave our guests with, one final sort of, hey, I wish someone had shared like one piece of advice in the spirit of trying to, you know, maintain and hold on to whether it's the buy box or the work that you've put in behind your brand. Obviously, you've shared, you've had your fair share of like counterfeit and fraud. Yikes. What's the one or two things that you would want to leave just as like reminders for folks to consider or maybe do?
Such a good question. Again, to say that I think the number one thing is to expect that this is going to happen. It's going to happen. We're working in the Wild West, so you're going to have to circle your wagons. It's going to happen. Something is imminent. It's going to be there. Someone is always trying to game the system. So that's number one. And then number two is to prepare for it. Like we talked about, put it in that marketing plan, put it in your launch plan. Just add it in there. Let's start doing that. Let's make that a new way forward. I don't think I've actually personally done it. I think it's in the back of my head. I think that what we need to start doing is making that the norm as part of our strategic planning is like add that box for the launch. If that's engaging with a partner, like a Patu, if that's just taking that moment to wear that black hat and having that meeting. If you have a corporate affairs team or other corporate security team that deals with this, make that a part of the plan. Let's think through it, and you don't have to do it alone. And then number three, we like to do things in threes, right? Is to
Let's
continue
go
to
for it.
be
I love it.
nimble. So for folks, right? If you're not in e-commerce and you don't know yet, you think you know Google or you think you know Amazon, and then it changes. And so you're going to have to just constantly stay on your feet, constantly be creative. You're going to have to do it anyway, just to help drive sales and drive success and growth of the business. But we're also going to have to be creative and nimble and strategic around the fact that we have this huge cybercrime issue and fraud and third-party issue in our country. And by the way, we have third parties attacking each other. If you've read some of the articles, even within third parties, if I did have a Kristina's basement or Kristina's garage network of third party, you have to watch out for black hat even within. There's so many great articles about all the crazy things and the crazy evil things that are being done just to take down each other's third-party marketplaces. It's fascinating. So, read about it, find out about it, and let's get ahead of it and not pretend it's not there.
Such great advice. Even if you could extend the kind of sentiment of prepare for the worst, if you just took that even 10 steps further, and that's what to prepare for. Because then I think it forces you to think of all the things that you don't think could ever happen. And I like what you're saying, like it will. And it does. So I think can never be too prepared, but opening up the conversation in advance is such great advice too, because it forces sometimes, in order to move fast, you sort of want to just hit the go button and let's do it and then wait and see. But oftentimes the time absorption and the impact can be much greater without taking that time up front to circle the wagon.
Thank you. Thanks for all that you're doing. You're part of the sheriff circle, if you will, right? And all the work that you're doing to help brands. I consider you part of them, part of that limited pool, right, of that secret service, right, that's helping the U.S., but limited pool that's really exploring what's going on in the buy box and how do we protect our brands. So my black hat's off to you as well for being part of the solution. Thanks for having me.